Afternoon, guys. Hope you can all hear me. Welcome to webinar number 7 of the Independent Gyms webinar series. So we're sort of racing ahead with these at the minute. Done quite a few so far, digital. Obviously, I spoke about the platform. We've done with Guy Griffiths. This week, a quick couple of apologies first off. If you're tuning in looking for Ryan Charlesworth, unfortunately, Ryan came down ill early in the week, so we've had to reschedule Ryan's webinar to the 22nd. But what we have managed to do is Pete Webb has jumped on board. Pete Webb is, he owns and runs TLR Fitness, which is a consultancy company, looking at resilience and mental health awareness and a whole other host of things. So Pete stepped in to host this webinar for us, all about resilience, building resilience. Second apology, the lockdown cut is getting quite long at the minute. So if I look a bit like Tyson Fury's brother or cousin, I do apologise for that one. Not the good looking one either, I don't think. So there we go. So yeah, quick introduction for Pete. I've known Pete for quite some time now, 6 years working with him at Core. Before that, he worked at Holmes Place in an operator role. So he's done Holmes Place, equipment sales, international sales as well. And he stepped away at the beginning of 2020, just before the pandemic hit, to form his own consultancy business, looking at obviously resilience and mental health awareness and a whole host of other things. So Pete's going to jump in. He's the host at the moment. So on that note, over to you, Pete.
Okay, thanks very much, Rob. Oh, looks like my power's just gone off. Just to give you a heads up on where I'm coming from, I said Rob outlined I've been working out in the fitness industry for over 25 years in operations and then also manufacturing and sales. But to give you an insight of where I've actually come from in terms of building resilience, in 2019, I physically was working way too hard and hit burnout. I completely hit burnout, had to take time off work. And it was during that time when I actually looked at what my priorities should be in life and how to be better in myself and with well-being, and also look at what my true beliefs were, my true values, and hence the fact that I set up TLR Fitness. It was quite an irony that I pretty much had my own personal lockdown in 2019. And then in 2020, everyone had a national lockdown where their lives had to dramatically change. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm just going to start to share my screen. Bear with me 2 seconds. And I'm just going to take you through a presentation and get some feedback and some interaction as to how you look at resilience, how you understand resilience, but not just for yourself, but also for your teams and your organizations overall. So I'm going to take you away from this whole lockdown because everyone's mind bogged down in lockdown at the minute. So let's move ourselves away from lockdown and imagine yourself on a beautiful, idyllic beach. Forget everything that's going on and just have a little bit of time to yourself. We've got a 2-minute video just to watch and see what can happen when our resilience is tested.
The younger group are now down to their last litre of water, and without fire, it's impossible to purify more.
Don't cry, babes. What an hour today. Right, we ready?
With the group on their knees, they decide to put yesterday's argument behind them.
Someone else should be taking control of the fire. It's Ben's turn today. Let's see how we get on.
Right, you ready? Ben's tested everyone's patience. I get the impression sometimes that he doesn't really know what he's doing, but won't admit it.
No, so if you can't, well, it's not.
Keep going, keep going.
Oh my God, get the hands up. I feel like when I cry, so good.
This is the best, it's got the worst, this is the best, it's got the worst. You're ready, yeah? This is gonna go.
Get nervous, very, very nervous.
Come on.
on. Just keep it going. Come on, guys. Look at my son. You get involved, mate.
You absolute hero. Oh, I just need to put water.
Just buzzing that. We went from the lowest to the low. Now we're on a high. What, an hour later?
So what are the key takeaways from that 2 minutes of video? And why did I decide to actually show you video? First of all, it's a lot easier to look from the outside in than the inside out. And if you imagine yourselves in lockdown and look at what they were just going through, my belief is that probably most people on this call have gone through those emotions, or one of their team members have gone through those emotions. So within that video, we heard, don't cry. Emotions are at the lowest of the low. We're going to nail this today. Some people are feeling positive and pushing other team members to get a response. So there's definitely a motivation, a goal, which survival, which to be honest, a lot of us are all in right now, of keeping you focused to the cause. But there's also the argument from yesterday's put behind us. So you've got to remember, you've got to be able to move forward. Don't reflect on the negative, reflect on the positive and move that forward, going with encouragement and motivation. But there's also the obvious doubt of some others, some people doubting Ben's capability to make a fire. And is that members within your organization doubting other people's capabilities, or vice versa? And even though there's positivity, it's always tinged with negativity. The guy who's saying, hope for the best, but expect the worst. And it's our natural behavior to always default to the negative. And this is why when we're going through challenges like we're going through now, the mind and the motivation behind what you do is also always generally battling against a negative emotion. We've all seen the elation when the fire burst out into flames and the joy and success was achieved. And the pride that Ben feels when people are shouting, you absolute hero. It's actually giving people encouragement to then continue that good behavior that they saw and the results that they achieved. Now, this is quite a big one. There's no egos here. Quite often our ego gets in the way of us asking for help or for support, especially in the fitness industry. We pride ourselves on the strength in our fitness, and quite often it's very difficult to allow yourself to be vulnerable and open yourself up to say, do you know what? Today I'm not feeling as strong as I could possibly be. So they go from the lowest of the low to an absolute high in an hour. And if you look at yourselves through lockdown and what's been happening, I think we've all gone through those ebbs and flows. It's natural to go up and down a spectrum of emotion. And more importantly, the team collectively gather at the end to share their water. They've gained the results that they're looking for, and the collaboration and the community that is built within that desert island. The day before, they were probably wanting to throw Ben off the island. The next day, he's the hero, and he brings the whole community together. So what continues after this? The island is more idyllic. Everyone feels more confident about the future. And this is really my personal opinion of what many of us have been going through lockdown. So we call this resilience. And everyone talks about resilience at the minute. It's a bit of a buzzword. If you look at the actual description, it comes from the Latin resiliens, which means to bounce back. And what we're looking at is how you can increase your bounce back ability to get back to an equilibrium or a place where you feel more confident and you can cope with the pressures and stress you're under. So the American Psychological Association actually defines it quite well with the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, threats, or significant stress. And I think everyone would quite openly say we've been facing all of those 3 points over the last few months and into the last year. The important thing with the elastic band is if you keep it in the wrong environment, it will become brittle. If you put an elastic band in a fridge, it will become hard, it will become less flexible, and it will break. And what we're seeing is the effects. Around about 80% of people have highlighted that there has been some kind of stress or anxiety over this period of lockdown. So what does this look like, and how does resilience play out in terms of helping us cope with challenging events? You can see on the left-hand side here, we have challenging events, and on the bottom, we have resilience. And we can go through 4 different stages. And this one was from research that came out in the 1970s, but very clearly demonstrates some of the phases we may be going through now. When our challenging events are low and we're at any level of our resilience, we can cope. We then go from coping to feeling pressured, from pressured to overwhelmed, to the point of at some point, we may be feeling unwell. So with coping, you're able to manage everything that comes your way. You feel competent, you're confident, and you feel able to do the job you've got. And the good thing is you can switch off and you can relax. You don't have to worry about coping, it just happens naturally. Sorry. Press the wrong button. We then go into pressured. And this is where demands on your time and or your capability, and also the intensity, increases the sensations that you have arise. And pressures can come from the outside, and it can also come from the inside. Once we go over pressure, we hit this overwhelm area, and this is where the level of demand is beyond what you can cope with. And this is where our judgments start to be affected. You can lose the ability to prioritize one action against the other. You may lose sight of why you're doing things and what you are doing. And also, people and those around you may notice a difference in yourself. How you behave may possibly change as well. To the point where everything can just be a little bit too far. You've lost the grip of reality and it starts to become impaired. Your judgment becomes impaired and you become unwell. And that's where you may need external professional help to get you back on track to regain your equilibrium and your health to where you need it to be. So how do we move ourselves up and down this graph? Well, the first thing is we can devise ways to manage the events. Control your controllables. But also another thing we can do is to discover ways of how to cope. And this is something that I'm just going to look at in a little bit more detail now. So what I'm going to share you is something that comes from a study that was done by Vanderbilt University, and it was the development of what they call the Resilience Toolkit. And there was 3 elements that we looked at, which was a positive attitude, a resilience skill set, and also a healthy lifestyle. Now, some of those may feel fairly obvious to you, but let's just dive into them into a little bit more detail. So a positive attitude. Attitude drives our behavior, and behavior is what people see and what they judge us on. Now, there's a bit of a difference. I don't know who's done any behavioral analysis. There's things like Myers-Briggs and Insights, and I use a behavioral tool called CME. There's a bit of a difference between personality and behavior. And just to jump into that very quickly, it's a topic on its own. But personality is our values and beliefs. That actually drives our behavior. Now, the difference is that you can adapt your behavior, and we all adapt our behavior. You may act differently when you go to visit your girlfriend's or boyfriend's mother and dad for the first time. We've all seen Harry Enfield with, yes, Mrs. Patterson, no, Mrs. Patterson, how they're different when they're with someone else's parents compared to when your kids are with you on your own. And with behavior, that drives our impact on others. Our behaviors affect others. So there's two key real differences between behavior very quickly. We have people who are extrovert and people who are reflective. We've got people who also use their logical mind more and look at that from a task-orientated point of view, to people who feel and go with their emotions more. And this is just a very quick overview of how all our behaviors are different. And we can categorize those into, I categorize those into the four different elements that are classed by color, but that's another whole different topic. So let's have a look at the 6 points to look at. The first one is be optimistic. And I think the key thing is that there's always the analogy of glass half full or glass half empty. Now, there's one thing which is key, as I said, humans are always default to the negative. So the positive is always harder to find. Now, there's one key difference between positivity and optimism. Sometimes people are so positive, even when everyone knows there's a disaster happening, they're trying to be positive and upbeat. Optimism is slightly different. Optimism is you accept you are in a difficult place, but you can see the potential to move to a better place. If you are positive all the time, people will start to neglect or not take as much notice of some of the things you're saying. Whereas if you're optimistic and you're realistic and say, we're in a difficult time right now, but I'm going to get us through this, or we're going to get this through together, that's when optimism comes in. And we do that by, controlling the controllables and deciding on how we react to a situation. The second one is really important, which is nurture social connections. Now, we're being really challenged right now because of not being able to socially mix. But this group is a perfect example. The independent gym group, I look at the posts on there and there's people saying, help me. You've got a gym owner in Newcastle speaking to someone they've never met in Wales, and they're working out if they're allowed to be able to do PT in a marquee outside their club. That is nurturing a social connection. Showing a bit of vulnerability. I need some help. Please, can you let me know what to do? Use humor. It's always better to put a smile on your face and lighten the mood. I know it's difficult at sometimes, but humor and smiling at any point in time, or just cracking a joke and just letting your barriers down to be yourself, is key. And this is a big one, change. Generally, most people welcome change. You like it when you get a new set of clothes or you change your hairstyle. But the hardest change is one that you have had no say in. And this is what we are in lockdown. Because change that you have no warning about or no awareness that it's going to happen breeds uncertainty. And uncertainty is what the driver to stress and anxiety is. You have lost control, or you don't know where the end will come. Everyone's the same with, will I be able to open my gym or not? The dates change. Uncertainty is the biggest driver for this. In the fitness industry, we're used to seasonality. We're used to the fact that in January, we will see a lot more people come to our clubs and we'll see our membership sales increase. We know it'll get quiet in July. Because of seasonality and because it happens regularly, year on year, we see the same cycle of events. We have processes around that. We understand it. We're prepared for it. The teams know about it. Salesmen will not be worried that they're not selling as many memberships in July than they would be in January, because we've learned how to react and we can take on a coping mechanism with the seasonality change. And this is what's different about lockdown. Lockdown has forced a change upon us. We also need to cultivate gratitude. It's so important, especially with staff in the organization, to show your appreciation for everything that they're doing, but also show gratitude to your members who are staying loyal to you while the facilities are closed. Everyone loves to get some positive feedback or to have a thank you. And sometimes people think it's a little bit disingenuous to start saying thank you because you don't normally do that. Gratitude doesn't wait. Say it now. It may feel a little bit uncomfortable if you don't normally do it, but it will have a massive impact to those around you and how they respond back to you. And as the quote says here, be strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to know when you need help, and brave enough to ask for it. And this is what I've really liked about the independent gym group, is everyone has been open to ask questions, look for help, but your team members and the rest of your organization will be wanting the same. Now, it's perfectly all right to show chinks in your armor. This is unprecedented times. We've never been through this before. It's perfectly all right to say to your organization and your teams, I don't know what to do. But what's important is you back it up and you say, I don't know what to do and I need your help. However, the reason why we started this gym, the reason why we do what we do in our clubs hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is how we're going to do it and what we're going to do to achieve the results. And that's really important. They know that you haven't lost your clarity of direction and where you want to go with the business, but they understand that you're vulnerable and you need some help. And I think this is the biggest challenge for many people to take that step over. So they're the 6 ways to build the attitude. The 4 skills to a resilient skill set. Again, many of you will have heard these comments, these phrases before maybe. Mindfulness, the racing mind. The mind is a powerful tool and it will influence us through unconscious behavior and outside of conscious behavior as well. If you can just take a step away from the noise, even if it's 30 seconds to a minute, there's so much stuff that's going on. To be able to take some time out and just live in the present and the now, rather than thinking about what is happening tomorrow, the next day, because that will just automatically build the pressures and the stress and get the mind racing again. You do have to take some time out for yourself. Effective communication is key. It's a two-way process. Make sure that you have an intent to listen and not an intent to talk. Quite often when we're listening to team members or others, we always want to get our point across first. Take the time to listen. There's a wealth of knowledge out there and people wanting to share it. Let's utilize our two-way communication. Problem solving. Everyone has problems and challenges right now. The key thing is to acknowledge there is a problem in the first instance. And I said, if you can grasp the problem and take control of it, if there's a problem you can't influence or control, that is outside your control, let's shelve it. Let's leave it. We can't control what the government is going to do. Yes, we can influence it and we can sign up on the petitions and everything else that is going on. That's great. But let's focus on the 4 to 5 things that we can control, which will have a dramatic effect of your business, be it just picking up the phone to your members and speaking to them rather than worrying about what the longer play is from the government, for example. And emotional intelligence. Being able to know what really distresses you and how it affects your behavior. And awareness is key on this, because if you have awareness of your behavior and your own emotional intelligence and the intelligence of those around you and how they're feeling and how they're reacting to this difficult environment that they're in, then maybe you will react slightly differently, or you will change the way that you normally would behave to your staff because you're having to deal with them virtually rather than face to face, and a different style of communication or the different types of personality behaviors that you have will change. Now, the third focus area is healthy lifestyle. And this is key on why we're in the business. And I think everyone is aware of the benefits of healthy lifestyle. If we break this down into 3 key areas: physical activity, practicing healthy nutrition, and finally, what a lot of people don't always remember is getting enough sleep. All of this physical activity, for example, will just help naturally reduce our cortisol levels. It's a natural stress reliever. And even though we're in the industry, it's still a tendency to overlook and prioritize these for ourselves while we're trying to face the challenges that are ahead of us. But think also of your members who at the best part of the time were struggling to get down to the gym 3 times a week before COVID. What are they struggling with? Is it their physical activity? Are they now reaching for comfort eating more and their nutrition has gone spiraling into an uncontrollable level? Or are you not getting enough sleep and recovery and a chance to give the mind some time to rest and refresh going into the next day? So this gives us a resilient toolkit. We have our attitudes, we have our skill set, and we have our lifestyle. And what I would encourage you to do is pick 3 of these. Look at this list and pick 3 of these and say, this is what I do really well. This is what I'm strong at. Because it's at this time that you hold on to your strengths. Your strengths will help drive and support you through areas that you may need to develop or you feel challenged under. For me, it was sleep. I would quite happily work till 3, 4 in the morning thinking I was getting ahead of myself on work. I wasn't. I was destroying my body and my mind. So just a simple method of I will go to bed at 10 o'clock no matter what. I will get my recovery cycle. So think of 3 things that you do well and then look at perhaps 1 or 2 things that if you change them slightly, they would make the biggest difference to you right now. And that will have a dramatic effect on your resilience and coping levels. Now, the thing is, we all like pressure and stress. It helps us to perform. If we look at Yerkes and Dodson's human performance curve, we actually perform best when we stretch ourselves. If we don't stretch ourselves and put ourselves under pressure, we get a little bit bored and we become too comfortable. But what we found ourselves in are when we go into strain and when we go into panic. And this is where overwhelm and unwellness starts to come in. And in terms of behaviors, if you look at this, you may have someone who their behavioral preferences are quite strong and they're very decisive. However, as soon as strain comes up, that decisiveness can turn into aggressiveness. And people will then change how they respond to you. People who are more feeling and extrovert. Think of, for example, your aerobics instructor who thrive on the environment of people and being creative. Their environment has massively changed and they've not been able to control that. And you may see this between some of the best Group X instructors have become withdrawn and that they look differently. They don't know how to hold an independent Zoom class because they normally thrive on this environment of people and sociality, and it's been taken away from them. So if we look back at this is a little test of vulnerability. I'm just going to put up a poll, and I'd just like you to say and vote, it's all anonymous, on where you would put yourselves right now on this graph. Be honest with yourself. We're all amongst friends here. And everyone is at different levels depending on what is happening within their organization. Okay. So if you have a look at the at the votes that came in. Let's have a look at the results. Great news is that everyone is staying at a coping level or pressured, and no one has got to that overwhelm point. Now, as long as you're all being joined a resilience webinar, probably the people who are less aware of this and ready to open up to listening about resilience or mindset or how you do things are probably already stepping into that overwhelmed or unwell stage. So the key thing now is to know and to keep in that coping to pressured zone. And all the stuff we've just gone through will allow you to do that. The key thing is that where we've been in the environments, this is our third lockdown now, and you've probably got used to being in lockdown and you're finding ways to cope with it as well. Had we done this graph in the very first lockdown, the results may have been slightly differently. Some of you may have already adapted your coping mechanisms and know how to adapt and change the behaviors accordingly. So the key thing is knowing what takes us from pressure to stress and how to rebalance. If we look at this spectrum, we would definitely all put into the area of uncertainty when the first lockdown came, and then we kept on being put into uncertainty at regular times by what was happening in the environment. The question is did you ever get to crisis stage? And everyone's heard about crisis management, but also then there's the chaos of where your normal way of thinking, the team starts to break down because they don't quite know the path that was put out to them in the first place when everything was normal, as we say. The key thing is not just getting back to the equilibrium, but every time you come back along that spectrum, be it from uncertainty or crisis, you come back stronger. And just like the elastic band, it will never come back into its same shape, but it will be used to being stretched and it will be able to get back onto that process of normality and equilibrium as quickly as possible. So now you just need to understand also what are your triggers? What triggers you from going from that coping? Those of you who are in coping, did you ever go to pressure? Those of you in pressure, what would trigger you to go into the next phase, into that overwhelm area? So what is it? Who is it? Surprisingly, 76% of people, 70% of stress was caused by people at work before we went into lockdown. Now we have less interaction with people. So what else is it that's causing you to hit these triggers and move up and down that spectrum? Is it a certain environment that you feel more stressed under? Some people are now working from home on a regular basis and they never used to work from home. It's a new environment to be working in rather than the club where you may be spending most of your time. So when we look at the overriding factor to resilience, to wrap it up, we have two main areas of our resilience. The first one is who I am. And this is the challenging of your emotions and how you motivate yourself and others in a positive and purposeful way. Now, the second is what I do. And this is setting a context, knowing where you are, where you want to get to, and how you focus on your results. Now, why a number of people have been challenged during lockdown is when you're at work and you're in your normal environment, generally what I do, people know what they do for their job, but very rarely do they have time to think of who I am. And it's right now that we are getting more challenged in the who I am. And that's what's unfamiliar to many of us. So there's 4 elements that build this up. The first one is awareness. And this is the awareness of your own and others' motivations. There's three elements to awareness. The first one is awareness of yourself. The second of awareness of others and your staff, your members, and those around you. And then the awareness of the environment, because the environment is constantly changing, as you all know. The rules change. Leadership presence is being tested as well. It's very hard when you are not able to personally see your staff every day, or speak to fellow members and colleagues, or speak to your members. So as a leadership, have you got strong enough values and beliefs that allow you to get through this and still pass through your bias to organizations, to your organization overall, and to your members and others around you? And then we go into the what you do. And these are when you make resilient decisions. So this is being able to take a valuable idea from concept to reality, but also how robust you are. And I think after lockdown 1, many owners were looking at how robust is my club? I don't have my normal membership. Have I got a digital strategy? What contingency have I got in my business? And this is where resilient decision making started to come into play of, do I change my model? Do I stick with what I've been doing? What can I adapt? And what decisions do I need to make? And this is collaboratively with your teams within your organization as well. And then a key thing which I said when you can show vulnerability is always making sure that you have a clarity of direction. You have a vision and a realistic strategy of what the future looks like. And if you are strong to your vision of why you started your facility in the first place, your club, your chain, whatever it is, then it will allow you to keep determined and continue on that goal. But it will also allow you to unify others and unify your purpose with others as well. So you bring your team along with you rather. So that's a very quick rundown. It's a massive topic. I've just put some very high level points on there to really make you think, and just maybe this is probably more about just about awareness right now. A bit of time to reflect what's happening within your teams, what's happening within your organization, and what's happening within yourself, and how you can put those coping strategies in place moving forward, so we don't go any higher up that graph. And in the not too distant future, all being well, we are back with our resilience intact. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pete. Appreciate it. So it's as usual, we'll have a Q&A. Anybody got any questions, throw them up through the chat feature. I think a couple of people had to drop off midway, but we're still there. So for me, it sort of stood out. I'm a bit of a, I won't say I'm a non-believer of sort of mental health awareness and that sort of thing, but maybe I take it a bit flippantly, but seeing it sort of pictured in the graph from coping, pressured, overwhelmed, unwell, kind of sort of pointed out, doesn't it? I think you can sort of recognise within yourself when everything's going fine, everybody's coping, but when the pressure starts to build, it's how you deal with that. So for me, it's really interesting seeing that sort of element of it. Questions just come through, I think, from Callum. Any specific tips about keeping our teams engaged and motivated, especially when they're on furlough as well?
Yeah, I think with the teams, it's really just the key thing is understanding the individuality of your teams as well, and how what drives them and what behaviors they would normally prefer to be in. We're not all different. I said there's a difference between an individual PT who may be very goal orientated and drive their members to get results and their clients to get results. They have a different style of behavior than, as I said, someone like the Group X instructor who needs to be in a group. So I think the key thing and the biggest takeaway I would say is understand what makes your team tick. What do they respond to? Because your teams are very individual, and that's something that I certainly do collectively when I'm working on teams is understand their behaviors first, because how you respond to one may be different to the best response to another. But I think just reaching out to them and being open and showing, as I said before, showing your vulnerability will allow them to feel vulnerable and open up. If you close the door and don't want to show your emotions, then they will do the same. And then what you have is the problem that they, or struggle that they may be going through, may be getting a lot worse to when you could have tackled it a little bit earlier. So I think that's a key thing, just understanding people's behaviors, and everyone's different, but the vulnerability is a key aspect as well. And I think what, just on the back of what you said, Rob, it's surprising. I personally know I was presenting back in 2019. I was at huge conferences. Inside, I was broken. On the outside, no one knew any different. It's very easy to hide behaviors and think that you are actually stronger than you are. So that's just a bit of a caveat on that as well.
When you get to the on that scale, coping, pressured, overwhelmed, to me, this sums like the tipping point is from pressured to overwhelmed, and that's when the issues can arise. What would you do at that point? Who would you, is that where you sort of look at your social networks and the resources around you? How would you react at that point?
I think the key thing is you said reaching out. You can't do it on your own. Reach out to be it people within the industry, and that's what I said I liked about the independent group so far, is people are prepared to reach out and ask for help. That's the key thing, and that's often a difficult place to go to. I think having an open conversation, be that with a family member or a close friend or whatever, share a problem shared, as they say, is quite key. But I think just first of all, accepting and being self-aware, that's the biggest struggle I think that a lot of people go through, is not having their own self-awareness, that they're actually at that point. And then depending on how far that has progressed, then obviously there may be some professional help that's needed, be that therapy or I hate the use of medical stuff, but maybe some medical help as well. But as I said, that's when it goes to the higher level. But I think the openness is key.
And I think with the self-awareness, I think perhaps from a masculine perspective, it's almost, we say to ourselves, we're okay, we can get on, we can cope, we can deal with this. And that's probably the bigger issue, is like it's having the awareness in yourself to say, I am struggling with this kind of thing. So yeah. I like that. The 4 things I'd put down as well, sort of, I suppose, tips and stuff. One thing I've always thought is worry about what you can change or what you can influence. And if you can't influence it, if you can't change it, there's no point worrying about it. You just have to deal with it. So I think you mentioned that as well, which is sort of a useful sort of mantra, I suppose. If you can't change it, don't worry, in a way. And then the other one, taking time out. It's just, if you're at the pressure and overwhelmed point, if you keep going and going, you just get into a corner, don't you? So taking that time, half an hour to step away, just to give you a break, I think. Right. I think that's all. I think if we've got any more questions coming through from any of the guys. So Pete, I'm going to thank you for your time. Thank you for stepping in last minute as well. Yes, enjoyable website, loads of good insights. We'll record this obviously, and we'll send it out on the YouTube channel, so everybody wants to rewatch it, they can do. And we'll have the rest of the webinars scheduled today for February. So guys, thanks for jumping on board, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye, guys.